Hi, this is Mr. Gideon. So what is supply? Supply refers to the willingness and ability of sellers to produce and offer to sell different quantities of a good or a service at different prices during a specific time period. So now we're looking at the sellers, and this is something you might not be as used to thinking in terms of, because most of your life you've been thinking like a buyer. The law of supply and many other factors when we're talking about supply are kind of in the reverse of demand. The law of supply states that as the price of a good or service rises, the quantity supplied of the good rises, and as price falls, quantity supplied falls, ceteris paribus, of course. The law of supply does not hold if there's no time to produce more units, or if no more can be produced over any period of time. So just like with demand, there's a couple of different ways to show this, and in this case the most common way that we do so, just like with demand, could be through a supply schedule and a supply curve. So a supply schedule shows a collection of pairs of information that are including the price that could prevail in the marketplace, where people could sell coffee beans, using this example, and the quantity of coffee beans they would be, as sellers, willing and able to supply at that price. In this example, at $2, the sellers of coffee beans in the coffee bean market would be willing and able to supply 11.6 billion pounds worth of coffee beans. Let's say the price that prevailed was all the way down here at $1. We're talking about 10 billion pounds now. So obviously we have a direct relationship between price and quantity when it comes to supply, and that's the opposite of the law of demand, where we had an indirect or an inverse relationship between price and quantity. For supply, we have an upward sloping curve, like in this example, and just like with demand, sometimes the curves are straight lines, sometimes they're curvy in nature. But why are most supply curves upward sloping? An upward sloping supply curve reflects the fact that costs rise when more units of a good are produced. And you know this if you've taken business economics. You've had a taste of what it's like to run a business, to sell or supply products and services. And you also remember that even though you can get away in the short term with trying to decide what a price is that you feel you want to sell a product or service for, then in the long term, these prices are not determined by the sellers. They're determined by the consumers. Consumers, demanders, vote with their dollars. And we call this concept consumer sovereignty, meaning that the consumer is king, the consumer is queen. They rule in the long term. And so these prices are primarily determined by consumer preference and choice over time. And so the sellers just respond. They try to make as much money as possible. If they can get a higher price, they're really happy about that. They certainly use all the tools they can possibly use to try to drive the price up in the marketplace, to increase and maximize their profits. But keep in mind that consumer sovereignty is the overriding factor when it comes to prices in the marketplace. And in this case, suppliers, sellers just adjust. Obviously, if you're thinking like a seller, it's probably pretty intuitive why you would want to try to push as much into the marketplace of whatever you're selling if the price starts to rise. If you're selling coffee and for a long time what you were willing and able to supply out there for $1 is something you're used to, and then you see you can get $2 for your coffee, you'll hire more workers, you'll stay at work longer, you'll order more supplies because yes, your costs rise to do so, but you're going to most likely have a higher profit margin. Now, just like with demand, there's different levels of supply. Keep in mind that later on we're going to be talking, for most of this class in fact, about supply across an entire economy for all of the goods and services of that economy. We refer to that as GDP. But for now we're still in the micro phase, and you can look at supply on an individual level, both the supply of an individual seller to the marketplace, in this case of coffee beans, or a group of sellers. The example that we have here is Mr. Figueroa, who supplies coffee beans, Mr. Bien, who supplies coffee beans, and then they, along with all the other sellers in the marketplace combined, would form a market supply curve. So understand there's individual supply curves, market supply curves, and then later what we'll refer to as aggregate supply curves.